It was a bright morning when she walked into the bank. She wasn't in a rush. She wasn't angry. She wasn't loud. She was calm, well-dressed, and graceful, like someone who had everything under control. Her clothes were clean and classy. Her heels clicked softly on the marble floor. She held a small black purse in one hand and a warm coffee in the other. She walked to the counter, just like any other customer. But the moment the teller saw her, her eyes changed. It was just a second, but it was there. That slight look of judgment, of doubt. The woman smiled politely. "Good morning," she said softly. The teller didn't smile back. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," the woman continued. She slid her ID and bank card across the glass counter. Her voice was soft, but confident, the kind of voice that didn't beg. It simply informed. The teller looked at the card, then at the ID, then at the woman. A pause. A long one. "This is your account?" the teller asked, her tone uncertain. "Yes," the woman replied simply. "I've had it here for years." The teller frowned slightly. She tapped on her keyboard, looking at the screen, then back at the woman. "And what amount would you like to withdraw?" she asked, still with doubt in her eyes. 20,000, the woman replied. Now the teller's eyes widened just a little. "Cash?" she asked. "Yes," the woman nodded. The teller's lips tightened. "One moment," she said. She stood up, walked to the back, and whispered something to another staff member. They both looked toward the woman. Then both laughed quietly. The woman saw it. She saw everything. But her face didn't change. The second employee came forward. "Hi, ma'am," she said. "We're just doing some extra verification. Could you provide a second ID?" The woman calmly reached into her purse, pulled out another form of ID, and handed it over. The employee took it, still not smiling, still doubting. Minutes passed. The woman was still standing. She wasn't offered a chair. She wasn't offered water. Others behind her were called forward, helped, served. But she waited. More whispers, more glances. One security guard nearby started watching her, like she might cause a problem. A few customers nearby noticed. One older man frowned. A young mother looked confused. But the woman? She stood silently, calm, still. She pulled out her phone, checked the time, sipped her coffee. One of the staff came back. "We're sorry," she said, still not smiling. "But your signature doesn't match perfectly. We'll need to verify some things." The woman raised her eyebrow, just slightly. "Your system has facial verification," she said. "Use that." The teller nodded but didn't move quickly. It was like they didn't want to help, like they thought she didn't belong there. Still, she didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't say, "You're wrong." She simply waited. Who was she really? Why was it so hard for her to take out her own money? She looked around at the big building, the fancy logos, the shiny desks, the employees walking around in suits. And for a second, her smile faded. Not because she was sad, because she remembered something. Something they didn't know. She took a deep breath. Then she picked up her phone. One message, one number, one call away. But she didn't press it, not yet. Instead, she looked at the teller again, still smiling. But this time, the smile wasn't soft. It was strong, powerful, and quiet. She had seen this before. Many times. She had walked into places like this and been treated like this. Not once, not twice, but too many times. But every time, they learned. Because she wasn't just any woman, and she wasn't just any customer, and this wasn't just any visit. This was the beginning of something they would never forget. She was still standing near the counter. 10 minutes had passed. Still no money. Still no proper answer. Just silent stares and small laughs behind the glass. The teller kept typing, clicking, looking at the screen like she was solving a mystery. But there was no mystery. The account was real. The woman was real. The money was hers. So why was this so difficult? The teller looked up again. There seems to be a problem, she said. Your photo on file looks different. The woman raised one eyebrow slightly. Different how? The teller didn't answer directly. She turned the screen around a little and pointed. This photo, your hair was different, and you were wearing glasses. The woman looked at the screen, then back at the teller. Yes, she replied calmly. That photo is 5 years old. People change. The teller forced a small fake smile. It's just policy. We have to be sure. Sure of what? The woman asked, now slightly firm. That I'm not myself. There was a short silence. Then the teller said, please wait here. She stood up and walked away again. This time, she went into a glass office where a man in a suit was sitting. They spoke for a while. The man looked out the glass window at the woman. He didn't wave. He didn't come out. He just stared. The woman met his gaze and held it. Calm. Unmoving. After a minute, the teller came back with the man. Hello, he said with a plastic smile. I'm the assistant branch manager. We're just doing a quick verification. You understand, right? She nodded slowly. I understand policy. I don't understand attitude. The smile on his face faltered just a little. He glanced at the teller, then turned back to the woman. We're just trying to protect our customers, he said. From themselves, she asked quietly. He didn't answer that. Instead, he said, would you mind stepping aside while we check some more information? Her eyes narrowed, but just for a second. Then she said, I'll wait outside. She turned and walked toward the door, still calm, still composed. But the moment she stepped out of the bank, her calm changed slightly. Her face didn't show it, but inside, she was disappointed. Not surprised, just tired. Tired of being questioned. Tired of being judged. Tired of being doubted, over and over again. She pulled out her phone, looked at a safe number, and for a few seconds, she just stood there. She could make one call, and everything inside that bank would change in minutes. But she waited, because sometimes giving people a little more time to reveal who they truly are is the best way to show them who you truly are. Inside the bank, the assistant manager spoke to 2 more staff members. I'm not convinced she owns this account, he said. Maybe it's fraud, another whispered. The teller laughed softly. She doesn't look like someone with that kind of money anyway. They all smiled. But their smiles wouldn't last long. Because outside, the woman had made her decision. She pressed call. A man answered. She spoke 5 simple words. Activate protocol at Riverbank. Then she ended the call. No explanation, no anger, no panic. Just a quiet order. One that would shake that entire branch from the inside out. Because while they were doubting her identity, they had no idea that the bank they worked in, the name on their paychecks, the logo on the front door, all belonged to her. Inside the bank, time kept moving, but not for her. She had been standing for over 20 minutes. No chair was offered, no apology. No one even made eye contact anymore. She stood near the glass wall, her phone back in her purse, both hands resting calmly in front of her. She looked around slowly. The bank was full now. Customers came in and out. Some rushed to the ATMs, others sat waiting for services. But she still waited. And then came the moment that truly changed everything. The security guard, a man in his late 30s, tall and serious looking, walked up to her. He didn't look angry, just suspicious. Excuse me, Mom, he said. Are you waiting for someone? She looked at him politely. No, I'm waiting for my money. He tilted his head slightly. You've been standing here for a while. Can I ask why? The way he said it wasn't kind. It was the kind of tone that says, you don't belong here. I already told the teller. They're verifying my account, she said quietly. The guard nodded. Right, but the staff said you've made a large withdrawal request. We just need to make sure everything's safe. She gave a half smile. I didn't realize standing quietly could be unsafe. The guard didn't answer. He just looked her over, head to toe, as if trying to figure her out, as if trying to find something wrong. Then behind them, a voice called out, loud enough for others to hear. It was the teller. Ma'am, we're still checking your identity, she said. It would be better if you didn't block the entrance. People in the waiting area turned. Some stared, others whispered. A young woman near the door frowned. An older man shook his head slowly. They could see what was happening, but said nothing. The woman still didn't speak. Instead, she stepped 2 feet to the side, out of the imaginary way, and stood still again. No anger in her eyes, just disappointment. The kind that goes deep. The teller smirked. She returned to her desk. The assistant manager walked past and avoided looking at the woman altogether. And then it got worse. A man in line, a businessman in a shiny blue suit, stepped forward and spoke to the teller. Is she causing trouble? He asked loudly. The teller chuckled. No, just confusion. The man looked at the woman and said, Ma'am, this isn't the place for games. People have work. Still, she didn't say anything. She looked at the man, then at the teller, then at the clock. Exactly 7 minutes had passed since the call she made outside. And that was the moment she took a slow, deep breath, like someone who was watching a play come to life exactly as written. She looked toward the glass entrance. Nothing yet. Inside, the staff were moving around casually. A young employee near the printer was scrolling on her phone. The assistant manager was making coffee in the back room. The same teller who had mocked her now served another customer, smiling and laughing as if nothing had happened. And then it began. A large black car pulled up outside the bank. It didn't park in the customer lot. It stopped right in front of the entrance. The engine stayed on. The doors opened. 2 men stepped out. Black suits, dark glasses, calm faces. They walked toward the entrance without hesitation. The security guard stepped forward, confused. Excuse me, can I help you? One of the men showed him a card. The guard stepped aside instantly. Inside the bank, everything slowed down. People looked up. The teller froze mid-sentence. The assistant manager came rushing out of the back. The 2 men walked straight to the woman. No words yet, just silence. Then one of them spoke. Ma'am, he said with deep respect, we're ready when you are. The bank went quiet. You could hear the printer stop. The keyboard stopped clicking. The air felt heavier. The assistant manager took a step forward. I'm sorry, is everything all right? He asked, trying to sound polite. The woman looked at him calmly. Then at the teller. Then at the man in the blue suit who had mocked her. And then she finally spoke. Ask your staff, she said softly. What name is written on the highest office in this building? They blinked. She looked at the assistant manager again. Go on, she said. Whose name is on your monthly salary slip? The color drained from his face. The 2 suited men stood behind her, saying nothing, just waiting. The woman took one small step forward and said, You doubted my identity. You laughed. You whispered. You humiliated me in front of strangers. But now, she turned to the teller. I want you to look at me again and tell me I don't belong here. No one spoke. No one moved. Because at that moment, every person in the bank realized the truth. She wasn't just another customer. She was the owner. And they had just mocked the person who signed their paychecks. The bank was silent. No one said a word. No one dared. The woman stood in the center of the room like a calm storm, quiet but powerful. The same staff who laughed at her, questioned her, ignored her, now couldn't meet her eyes. The two men who had arrived in the black car stood beside her like a silent wall of authority. They weren't bodyguards. They weren't assistants. They were from the corporate office, her office. The assistant manager finally spoke, his voice shaky. Ma'am, if we had known who you were." She raised her hand gently, just that one small gesture, and he stopped speaking. "You're not supposed to treat people well because of who they are," she said. "You're supposed to treat people well because it's right." The words hit everyone like a cold wind. She turned to the teller, who now looked pale. The young woman clutched a file in her hand, looking down, lips tight. "I gave you every chance," the woman said softly. "To be kind, to be fair, even just to be human." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. No anger, no drama, just one action. She made a call. It rang once, twice. Then a voice answered on the other end, calm, respectful. "Yes, Mom. It's me," she said. "Branch number 024. Start the internal review." "Yes, Mom. Right away." She hung up. That was it. Just one call. But inside the bank, it felt like the ground had shifted. Because that one call meant something powerful. It meant the higher management was already watching. It meant emails were being sent. Cameras were being reviewed. Voices were being recorded. Every move, every word, from the moment she walked into that bank, was now part of a file. A report. A case. The assistant manager stepped forward again. "Mom, please give us a chance to fix this. We'll release your funds right now. And we deeply, deeply apologize for the inconvenience." The woman looked at him. "Inconvenience," she repeated softly. The word hung in the air. What happened here wasn't a mistake. It was a mindset, and that doesn't change with an apology. He didn't reply. She looked around the bank, at the customers who had been watching, at the staff who were now pretending to be busy. Then, for the first time, she walked up to the counter, to the same teller. The teller's hands were shaking slightly. The woman leaned forward just a little and said gently, "Do you remember what you said to me earlier? When you doubted my account, my ID, my face?" The teller nodded, barely. "Good," the woman said, "because I don't want you to forget it. Not because I'm angry, but because next time someone walks in who doesn't look like your idea of a rich customer, you'll remember this moment." Then she turned to the suited men behind her. "Clear the account," she said. "Close it." The assistant manager looked panicked. "Ma'am, please. This is your flagship branch." She looked at him directly. "Not anymore." He went silent. The suited men nodded and stepped away to handle the request. The woman stood tall, proud, and calm. She didn't shout. She didn't insult. She didn't threaten. Because true power doesn't need to raise its voice. It just needs one phone call. And the right reason. The woman stood at the center of the bank, tall, composed, and still quiet. But outside, something was changing. As the teller stared down at her desk, her hands trembling. As the assistant manager walked away, wiping sweat from his forehead. As the customers whispered in low voices, 2 more black vehicles pulled up. They weren't flashy. They didn't need to be. They parked beside the first car, all 3 engines still running. From the second car, a woman stepped out, sharp suit, straight posture, clipboard in hand. Behind her, 2 more people followed. From the third vehicle came a tall man in a navy blue blazer with a gold pin on his lapel. That pin was important, very important. It meant head office. They weren't here for a meeting. They weren't here for coffee. They were here for a decision. The moment they entered the branch, everyone felt it. It was like the air changed. Customers moved aside. Staff went still. The woman, the true owner, didn't turn to greet them. She didn't need to. The woman with the clipboard walked up to her and said, "We're ready to proceed. Do you want to do this privately?" The owner shook her head. "No," she said. Let them hear. The head office team nodded and split into different directions. One walked directly to the assistant manager. Another asked the teller for her name. One took out a printed document titled, Immediate Conduct Review, Executive Level. The assistant manager stammered, "This isn't necessary. We were just unprofessional." The woman with the clipboard interrupted. "You were unprofessional." The man in the navy blazer approached the owner. "Ma'am, we're prepared to suspend the entire branch staff while we investigate, starting with the assistant manager." She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the staff around her. Some were nervous. Some were scared. A few looked ashamed. But none of them spoke. They had all been part of it. The doubt, the laughter, the silence. And now they were facing the result. She finally spoke. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I want change." The man nodded. "Understood. I want every employee in this branch sent for complete retraining," she said, "not just in banking, but in respect." The woman with the clipboard noted it down instantly. "And I want this branch shut down for 24 hours, she continued. "Let the customers see the notice. Let them ask questions." There was a quiet gasp from the assistant manager. "But ma'am, the board." "I am the board," she replied coldly. "You don't speak over me." Silence followed. Pure, complete silence. Customers watched like they were witnessing history. One elderly lady sitting near the window wiped a tear from her eye. Another man nodded slowly, whispering to his wife. "Good." Someone finally stood up. The head office team got to work. Files were pulled. Footage from the security cameras was saved. One by one, the staff were quietly told to step away from their stations. The teller, the same one who had mocked her, was led into a small meeting room. Not to be punished, but to face what she had created. Meanwhile, the woman, the real owner, finally took a seat. The same seat they never offered her before. She sipped her coffee, now cold, but still tasted like calm power. No yelling, no threats, just action. Because sometimes the most powerful arrival is the one that doesn't need to be loud. And in that moment, the staff finally understood. She wasn't just the bank's owner on paper. She was its backbone, its spirit, and they had tried to break her. But instead, they exposed themselves. The bank was no longer just a place of money. That morning, it had turned into something else, a stage. And on that stage, truth was finally ready to speak. The woman, still seated calmly in the lobby, looked around at the space she once designed herself. The marble floors, the clean counters, the logo on the wall, all of it had once been her vision. But the people, that was the part she couldn't build. Only they could choose who they became. The assistant manager was now seated in the back room, face pale, his hands folded nervously. He wasn't used to being powerless. Not like this. The teller sat in another office. Her head was down. Her voice, the same one that had spoken with sarcasm earlier, now barely made a sound. And in the center of it all, she sat like a quiet judge. The woman with the clipboard approached her again. "Ma'am, the HR director is on the line. He's ready for your instructions." She nodded and took the phone. Her voice was still soft. "Yes, remove the assistant manager from this location. Effective immediately." Pause. "No, I don't want his job gone. I want his thinking fixed. Transfer him to training under someone he once thought beneath him." Another pause. "And the teller. She needs accountability, but not punishment. Assign her community work at our foundation's women's support desk. Let her sit across from someone like me and really listen." She handed the phone back. People around her were quiet, but their eyes said everything. Respect, shock, and for some, guilt. One of the younger employees, a new trainee who hadn't said a word all morning, stepped forward. She was nervous but sincere. "I just want to say," she said, her voice shaking, "I didn't know who you were. But even if I had, I should have spoken up. I'm sorry I didn't. The woman looked up at her and smiled. Not the calm, guarded smile from earlier, but a real one. "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them right," she said, "but you just learned the most important part of leadership, having a voice when it's not easy." The young woman nodded, eyes wet. Then the man in the navy blazer, the head office rep, stepped in front of the staff, clipboard in hand. He cleared his throat and spoke loudly. "Staff of Branch 024, he began. "Today, you have witnessed something rare. Not a power move, not punishment, but a lesson." He pointed to the woman seated in the lobby. "This is not just a client, not just a boss. This is the founder of the very system you stand behind every day. She built the values this company was meant to stand on. And today, she reminded all of us what those values actually mean." No one clapped, but no one needed to, because in that room, silence had become the deepest kind of respect. The woman stood, slowly, gracefully, the same way she had walked in, alone, unnoticed, doubted. But now every eye was on her. And not because of power, but because of truth. She walked toward the exit, each step steady, each breath slow, each moment unforgettable. She passed the staff. Some looked away, ashamed. Others bowed their heads. A few, like the young trainee, held her gaze, and in their eyes, you could see the change already beginning. At the door, she paused and turned, and said one last thing. "Don't remember my name," she said gently. "Remember this feeling. Because the next time someone walks through those doors looking different than you expect, I hope you'll remember what respect really looks like." And with that, she stepped outside. The door closed behind her. And inside that bank, nothing would ever be the same. She had left the building, but her presence still echoed inside. No one returned to normal. No one could. The bank's lights still glowed. The machines still hummed. The scent of fresh coffee still floated in the air. But something had changed, something bigger than policies or paychecks. Inside, the staff stood like students on their first day of school. They were no longer employees. They were learners now, and she had been their unexpected teacher. The assistant manager sat alone in the small meeting room. He wasn't thinking about his job title anymore. He was thinking about the words she had said. "You're not supposed to treat people well because of who they are. You're supposed to treat people well because it's right." It played in his head like a song he couldn't turn off. The teller sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes red. Her smirk was gone, her sarcasm nowhere to be found. All that remained was a deep regret, not just for what she did, but for who she had become in that moment. Because now she saw it clearly. She hadn't just denied service. She had denied respect. She hadn't just questioned identity. She had questioned someone's dignity. And it wasn't just any woman she disrespected. It was the one who owned the bank, who built it, who paid her salary, who had chosen silence over shouting, and still won. The call that followed. Later that evening, in her office at the headquarters, the woman sat behind her desk. The same calm expression on her face, but this time, something had softened. Her assistant walked in. "Ma'am, the final reports from Branch 024 just came in." She didn't even look up. "I'm not interested in numbers right now," she said. "I want to know what they felt." The assistant smiled gently. "They were shaken, quiet, but something tells me they'll never forget today." She nodded slowly. Then she picked up her phone and made one last call. To the branch manager. Yes, the one who hadn't even shown up that day. The man who was supposed to lead, but never stepped forward. When he answered, she didn't sound angry. She sounded clear. "You didn't fail me today," she said. "You failed your team. You had the chance to lead. And you chose silence." "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I didn't know." She cut him off. "Knowing who I am is not the point," she said. Your people didn't fail because they didn't know my name. They failed because they forgot their own values." He was silent. Then she said something no one expected. "You still have your job. But from today, your office isn't behind a glass door. It's out there, at the front counter, with the people." He gasped quietly. "Yes," she confirmed. "You'll serve customers directly for the next 30 days. Learn what they go through. And more importantly, learn what you've allowed." Weeks had passed since the dramatic day at Branch 024. The cameras had stopped rolling. The headlines had faded, but for those who had witnessed the transformation, it was only the beginning. The woman who had owned the bank was no longer just a face in the crowd. She was a symbol of dignity, of quiet strength, of integrity. The assistant manager, now on a personal journey of growth, stood in front of the bank's counter. Not in his office, not behind a desk, but standing face to face with the customers. For the first time in a long while, he truly saw them. The elderly man who counted pennies for his coffee. The single mother who had always feared being judged for her balance. The young woman with the big dreams but little to her name. He'd always overlooked them. But now he saw their humanity. The teller, the one who had first mocked the woman, had been reassigned. Her community service at the Women's Foundation was the hardest thing she had ever done. Listening to women who had been beaten down by life in ways she could never imagine. It changed her. The laughter and judgment that had once slipped so easily from her lips were now distant memories. She was different. She had to be. She understood that now. The head office team, who had come down to watch and assist, were still in close contact with the bank. They knew what was happening, knew what had changed within the walls of Branch 024. One by one, they received calls, not from the media, but from people who had been touched by the quiet revolution that had unfolded in that small, ordinary branch. Some shared their stories of how they had been treated unfairly at the bank or at other institutions, only to walk out that day with a sense of hope, of fairness. The real change. One afternoon, a new employee who had joined after the incident was walking into the building. She had heard rumors about the events of Branch 024, but like most, she thought it was just an isolated case. When she arrived for her first shift, she was greeted by the assistant manager. He smiled, but this time, there was no arrogance in his expression. There was respect. She noticed it immediately. "Welcome," he said, genuinely. "We're happy to have you here." The young woman nodded, taken aback by the warmth in his voice. This was the same manager who had once made her feel invisible, as if she didn't belong. But today, something felt different. And she wasn't the only one who noticed. The ripple effect. News spread across the company, from the smallest branch to the highest office. The employees were no longer just workers. They were leaders. They were encouraged to make decisions, not based on hierarchy, but on empathy. Their focus was no longer on profits or deadlines, but on people, and it was transforming the bank from the inside out. The CEO of the bank, the woman who had been misunderstood, didn't just stop at fixing the immediate issue. She had planted a seed, and like any good leader, she nurtured it. Every single staff member was required to take part in empathy and diversity training. It wasn't about ticking a box. It was about reimagining the culture. The bank had always prided itself on being a service provider, but now it was becoming a safe space for everyone who entered. She made one final move. The old logo was replaced. The words were simple, but powerful. Respect is the foundation. It was a message for the employees and the customers alike. When they walked into the bank, they weren't just entering a place of transactions. They were entering a place where people's stories mattered. The legacy lies on. The woman who had started it all. The CEO received countless messages over the next few months. Letters from clients who had been wronged. Messages from employees who wanted to thank her. And even from those who had doubted her, who had said, "She doesn't belong in this space," now admitted they were wrong. And yet, the one message she valued the most wasn't a thank you card. It wasn't a letter. It was something much simpler. It was from the young woman who had first mocked her at the teller desk. The message read, "I've learned that power isn't about who you can push down. It's about who you can lift up. Thank you for showing me that." She smiled as she read it, not because it was an apology, but because it was something more. It was the beginning of her transformation. And in that small, simple note, she had passed the lesson forward.